get there we go. In just a second, Kay will screen share and he'll put some stuff up there. But man, we're so glad to have you guys. If you're new or you haven't been around for a while, we know you guys are busy and we really super appreciate the fact that you're carving out an hour and we take it pretty seriously as a team. And what we've really seen happen is kind of a network. A lot of you guys are, whether you're part of a denomination or whether locally you've got some relationships that you're in, we've really watched as this call has become sort of a network in and of itself. And we get lots of reports of people sharing resources and just sharing life together as well. So we hope that through this year that you'll lean into these calls. We'll try to get ahead of it, making sure that you get calendar invites. If you were on the call today, but you kind of stumbled in, like you didn't get an invite in your calendar or you are not on the mailing list, it would be great in the chat if you would indicate that, and Nate or somebody will pick that up, because we do have a regular calendar invite and a email that goes out as a follow-up to the call. So if you're on here today and you're not getting those, that means you're not on the think tank list. And we're very careful. Like all you're going to get is what we just mentioned. You are not entering into some sort of a sales marketing thing by giving us your name. It's just a way of reminding you about these calls. So make sure you drop your email in there. That would be really, really awesome. Cool. The other thing we want you guys to know, and then we'll jump into the three parts of our conversation today, is that our intent, even as we have 40 to 50 people on the call right now, is to have some conversation, some degree of facilitated conversation that's happening. So we want to invite, encourage, compel you guys that as we walk through these topics, our objective is not for myself or any of our guys, Kay, et cetera, to just teach out. Our goal is for you guys to interact and facilitate. And so as that is something that strikes you, or you've got ways in which you can contribute to the convo, do not hesitate to unmute or at minimum use the chat to create some dialogue. And our guys will be in there to really facilitate that and to make it happen. Cool. Here's the three lanes we want to go in today. And we always kind of do this in sort of a three-lane way, two or three lanes, because we know that different things hit different people. And we want to hit kind of your personal leadership development, a little bit of a resource, and then maybe a deeper conversation about ways in which we can have a greater impact. So the three lanes today, I'll just give them to you ahead of time. Just a quick opening, almost like a Devo that we want to give you around some fears that potentially we need to diagnose really as leaders and what that looks like as we lead out. Then we want to talk briefly around ways in which some ways in which we would give you some placeholders for projecting as you look at, I'm going to say it, guys, don't throw anything, as you look at Easter and what that looks like coming up. A lot of you are already ahead of that and you have things, but we want to just talk briefly through some helps that might potentially help you as you project, like what is our attendance going to be? What does that need to look like? Are we doing enough services? Are we not doing enough services? We're going to do that. And then the bulk of our call, probably the last 30 to 40 minutes, we want to have a conversation with you guys around designing moments that matter. And whether you're an executive pastor, a lead pastor, or maybe somebody at the executive table, we believe this is something you can take back to the team and maybe push in and see if there's some moments that can't be a thing. So let me take this first part, and then I'm going to hand it off to Kay to do some of the Easter stuff. Let me take this first part just to talk briefly about leadership fears. And part of our Monday Fuel that we do, where we try to put out some content for you guys on Monday, we kind of tackled this like 2 weeks ago. But as you guys get into January, one of the things I would challenge you around is to maybe do some self-awareness or some processing prayerfully in your own life around leadership fears. Has anybody had an MRI? Anybody had an MRI? Kay and I were talking about, I had an MRI 3 weeks ago. It was the first time I did like the full tube thing. And I got to tell you guys, I was the guy that went in and I was in there like maybe 60 seconds. And I said, you got to get me out of here right now. and they slid me out, and the guy wanted to know if I wanted sedation, and I probably should have done that, but I said, no, let's give it another shot. I'm gonna man up. And so I slid back into the I slid back into the MRI unit, and somehow I made it through 30 minutes of sitting in there in that coffin. So if anybody's had one, you know exactly what I'm talking about and what that looks like, because it's insanity. I should have done the sedation thing. It's crazy, but what it cued in me, because if you're a leader like me, everything kind of fits through that filter. Is I started kind of pondering, like, what are the fears? And this is the question I'll throw to the call today. What are the fears innately in us that actually, if we're reflective and we're honest and we're aware, they drive the way that we lead, and even some of the decisions that we make or the paths that we choose as we're leading both our organization and our teams. So I'll open it up a little bit, but I would love for you guys to and again, I just gave you 30 seconds to think about it, but maybe dump some of those in the chat. I'll give you one of mine and be a little bit vulnerable today if you don't judge me. One of mine is that I recognize that has impacted certain moments in my leadership over the past 25 plus years is, I guess, what I would call the fear of abandonment. Rob Hall and I'll let Rob unmute if he wants to talk about it. We were at dinner on Monday night talking about this a little bit, and the reality of uh, in pastoral ministry, if you've been in it long enough, you realize that it feels like at some point everybody leaves you, sooner or later. It feels like, they leave you, whether it's staff, whether it's people, and that revolving door is real. And I think over time, and probably some family of origin stuff, I developed this fear of abandonment. And so I would find myself leading from a clinging perspective, if you know what that means. In other words, I could become a people pleaser very easily. I could coddle staff a little bit because my goal was not healthy. It was, please don't leave me. So I'm going to do everything I can to keep you around so that you don't leave me, which is an insane way to lead and can lead you down to some other pathways. And so that would be an example. Now, this is not a therapy session. But the reason I think this exercise might be important, and you can go back to the Monday Fuel from a couple of weeks ago if you want to read about it, is because I think if we can name that, then we can actually manage it, and we can actually do some things around it that would actually make the fear more palatable. The quote that is in the deck says that the things that most shape how we lead are often the things that we least are the things that we least talk about. And so sometimes the way that we lead is actually impacted mostly by the things that we don't really want to address. And so let's address them. Rob, if I know you're driving, but you want to talk a little more about how that conversation went, maybe help the call, not just our personal convo.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, the fear of abandonment, especially for those of us that are in more urban city centers like San Francisco, I mean, the reality is so many people leave here. If you don't have family, if you can't ever own your home, it's rare that people stay. And so, yeah, we were just sharing and especially if you stay put for a long period of time at any one church, which is also rare, the reality is you're going to see a lot of people leave. And so we were just talking about that. And, for me and for many of you or some of you on the call, I'm not sure, but I know some of you, if you grew up without a father, you're already dealing with abandonment issues, right? And again, yeah, this is not a therapy session, but that feeds into it. But yeah, it's very real. And usually when people leave, they don't leave quietly. They slam the door in your fingers, they hit you in
Right.
the gut. And so, the ones that leave quietly are the good ones, the ones, that just hurt us a little bit, but just some of them are very real, very personal, and they hurt. So,
Yep. Steve appreciate that, Rob, because you in that urban setting, you deal with that. Steve asked, and I thought it was a good tee up question. As we've been processing this, and some of you have processed it with me or with some of our team, uh, there is a dark and a light side of these fears. In other words, I think fears do have a dark side that can lead us to unhealthy leadership. I think there's probably, to Steve's question in the chat, I would say there's probably some positives that come out of those fears or some benefits of kind of stepping into those fears, right? So in other words, I guess if I leaned into the abandonment thing that Rob just addressed, I do think there's some positives where potentially we care about people, right? We lean into relationships. We understand sort of in an Ecclesiastes way that those relationships are a little bit more fluid. And so the time that we have with people, we treat it with a little bit more value to that. So maybe there are some things there that are important. The other one that I think probably a lot of us, I'm looking at the chat right there, people letting us down, failing. Yep. One of the things that I think a lot of us on this call probably deal with as people in ministry leadership with a calling is that fear of doing the fear of not doing something significant, or maybe the way to rephrase that is the fear of insignificance. It's the idea that most of you guys on this call wake up every day and do ministry because you freaking care a lot. There are other things you could be doing right now, but you care a lot, and sometimes that's like a burden, right? And so you're driven, you're ambitious to see kingdom change happen. The fear is that we can be insignificant, and that can make us lead in a really unhealthy way. Let me read off some of the other ones. Fear of losing strategic ability over time with old ways that used to work. Come on, Jim. That's great. Um, Another one here. Brandon, you want to read some of these? I'm behind, and then we'll pivot.
Oh,
Sorry,
uh,
I'm getting individual messages from people who are asking stuff, so I'm answering those questions. Sorry, boss.
Steve, when you say can the fears also be beneficial, unmute and talk about that a little bit. I did a little bit, but maybe you can hit that a little bit more.
no, Lee,
Owens.
I think that's great. I think there's always a dark side, right? And I think about the giftings we have, uh, spiritual gifts that we have. It's got a dark side to it, and I think knowing that balance of being able to leverage some of those fears for our benefit to advance the kingdom. Because I know some of mine, one of mine that I didn't write down there was fear of rejection. I'm trying to connect what can fear of rejection, how can fear of rejection maybe benefit me? And I'm not saying everything has to have a bright side to it. I just think there's
Sure.
this delicate balance that we have where we can allow it to negatively affect our leadership, which no one wants, or we can see that for what it is. We step up, we own it, embrace it, and use that to benefit kingdom advancement.
It should make us a healthy leader as well, right, Steve? Or a more healthy leader?
Well, Lee, I think it's made you a healthy leader.
Oh,
And
great.
no, I think because you talked about your fear of abandonment. I mean, that draws us into relationship. I would see that as relationships become much more valuable. Not every relationship, but God places those in us, and we foster those relationships. So that's a beautiful thing I've seen in you and my relationship with you, as these other guys have as well. There is a bright side to that. We've got to know this balance of when does it become unhealthy, negatively affect our leadership, and how can I leverage that for kingdom advancement and good.
Great. Before we move on to the next topic, anybody want to add anything more to the conversation? On the screen, I'll have Kay put this up there, and you guys can think about it, and we will move on. It's just you might be asking the question like, Lee, why are we doing this? Why name our fears? Well, I think we need to know how these fears show up, and then the follow up would be, how do they shape my instincts when I'm in a room, when I'm leading? How do they shape our pace and our decision making? So there's a set of 4 questions that you'll get in the follow up from our call today that are there on the screen as well, that I think are pretty important. And the 4 questions that you can ask, they're really small on the screen, but you'll get them later, is this idea of how will this awareness of this fear, if you have this conversation, and I would challenge some of you to maybe walk in with your executive team or maybe your lead team and pause and have this convo, but how will this awareness change the way I lead in this next season, 2026 and beyond? Where might I release control sooner? That potentially your fear is probably driving some control issues, whatever that fear is, because fear typically drives us towards control. And then thirdly, where might I name some hard things faster? And finally, where might I slow down instead of trying to push through and ignore where I'm being driven and where that fear comes from? So that's a pretty big deal. And there's There's some questions there. Those 3 diagnostic questions kind of repeat that same thing. Cool. So every time we're on the call, we want to kind of give you guys something like this. The objective of this is one, for you to process. The second objective from our grow team is for you to go into in the right space. I get it, because there's a level of vulnerability that this question asks, but to you to go in the right space. Some of you are bold enough to probably go into your executive pastor, your executive team, and ask them the question. To go, what are the fears that you see me leading from? You want to have a great meeting? Throw your agenda away and ask that question, and that'll start to shape how your 2026 looks. So, Nate, you want to add anything to that, or any of the guys? Great. Cool. Awesome. All right. So that's kind of the personal side that we wanted to lean into. I know we could probably stay there for a few more minutes, but we want to make sure that we're coming across the board. So I'm going to throw it to Kay real quick and let him kind of lead us through some stuff around a resource that we want to offer to you guys that might be helpful.
Many of you guys have been asking, how do you know how many people are going to be coming to Easter? Obviously, we don't know, but how many services should we have? What time of our services? And so every time the seasons of Easter and Christmas comes time, everybody's like wondering, what are your times and how many are you having and how do you know? So um, we wanted to just kind of just take this time, as you guys are probably already having Easter meetings, planning meetings, to be able to look at it. And there's some basics here, and yet at the same time, we're also giving you a little bit of a template so that you can actually plug in your numbers to be able to potentially figure out a good projection modeling around that. So here's a couple of the principles. Number one, find some kind of anchor point. So many times churches actually the second week in January in your attendance patterns, if you look at it actually year over year over year over year, it's usually a little bit of a culmination because everybody kind of comes back first week, sometimes depending on where the first or second lands, that is usually an anomaly or different every year. But the second week is a really good anchor point in some churches. Or many churches will use the last 6 months of attendance to be able to figure out, okay, what do I base this on to be able to predict what my Easter attendance could be? Or even just looking at January and February. So whatever you do, or January, or whatever it is, you're trying to find some kind of anchor point and then look at your own data. This is where you do not compare it with other churches. You actually look at your own data to be able to say, find your anchor point. So let's say, for example, you decide it's going to be the last 6 months of attendance, or the last 3 months of attendance, or the second week of January. Then look at all of your past years. We recommend at least 3 years of data. You can go beyond that, but at least 3 years of data, and basically see what was your Easter attendance and what was your anchor number. So then you're looking at both of those numbers, and then you're trying to find what the multiplier has been on that. So for example, if your average weekend attendance was 1,000, but your Easter is 2,000 every single year, or then you were 2,000 the next year, and then your Easter was 4,000, the multiplier is 2.0, right? So then now you can actually then look and say, okay, hey, based upon my anchor point that sits today, what do we predict, or what do we imagine that Easter is going to look like? And with a couple of those ideas of the anchor points, when you do that, you'll probably see something that's very, very similar, except for some anomalies that will happen in certain years. Like you went into a new building, and because of that, something happened, or there was some outlying factors. But outside of that, establishing that anchor point. So what does that do to you? Why is that helpful? Obviously, you're trying to imagine, okay, how many services do we need to add a service? Do we need to take away a service? Do we need to add multiple services? How many volunteers do we need? How do we recruit for those type of things? And it backs into that kind of logic for you to be able to do that. So that's kind of the overarching perspective. Does anybody use anchor points and multipliers to be able to predict, or do you guys have spreadsheets around some of these things? Yeah, some of you guys, awesome. For others, it might be new. And so that might be something that you actually look at. Once again, you're using your own data. And, we're seeing, Easter somewhere between 1.5 to 3.0 as a multiplier based upon the anchor point that you're using for an average weekend attendance. And so it'll probably land in somewhere in that nature. We actually did a talk months ago about the difference with the audience of Easter versus the audience of Christmas. You definitely want to take a look at
That's
that and
right.
be reminded of that, because you know the Christmas audience and using Christmas as a benchmark and an anchor point towards Easter, we think is not the most accurate one because it's a little bit of a different audience. Just overarching perspective. Christmas is a little bit more of the traditions, and they come with family and friends to be able to celebrate. Easter actually is something that's less of a tradition and more of something that's of a spiritual renewal, or they're just trying to get back connected into the church. And so you will find better engagement after Easter than you do with Christmas for multiple different reasons. So all that to say, those are some things to consider around that. Lee, anything else before we go into the tool?
No, I was just going to say that some of you, in a larger context, and I saw Jim commenting in the chat, and we'll get to that in just a second. But don't forget, some of this has also been helpful over the last week or two, and what Kay's about to share with campusing. So sometimes it's pretty predictable. Maybe if you're in a large campus, like, hey, this is what it's going to be. But sometimes your campuses, if they're newer, maybe they only have 2 or 3 years, maybe they're going to. It can really help them to go. If you're multi-site, what are they looking at on a campus level? So keep that in mind, even as Kay shares this. This is campus by campus because we're really looking at adult seating capacity that's there, which I guess, Kay, an outlier would be we can have seats but no parking. We could have seats but no kid space. So those would be one of those outliers as well that you're referencing that might impact how many services we
Correct.
do. Even if we have seats in the room, we may have to do more or less based on that.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that, Jim, as far as the multipliers, but I've actually seen a little bit more of the indicator of the multiplier. If a church is a little bit more outward focused, then
Mm,
usually their multiplier is a little bit larger. And so, let's say, for example, if a church is very insider, they don't really have that many people that are on the fringes, then their Easter is actually not much larger than their regular attendance. But the more you have people on the fringes, which, because larger churches usually do, but it's also even more of an indicator if they're like unchurch focused or outsider focused or those type of things, they have more people come on events like this, and so usually the multiplier goes up a little bit higher. So a good perspective.
And some of that too
Okay.
would be if you are an invite culture, right, Kay? So if you're pushing invite, et
Yeah.
cetera, right? If you're just doing service and throwing Easter out there, it's probably going to impact that as well.
Yeah. And again, as a reminder, with other calls that we've talked about this, Easter is not all new people. It's actually a majority of your people that are on the fringes that are actually showing up all on the same time. So, if everybody's coming every 3 weeks, or a lot of people are coming once a month, or those two type of things, they're all coming on that day. So they're all associated in some kind of way, or they would even say, New North is my home, or Real Life is my home, or what, but and yes, then they're friends and relationships, but it's majority of it is actually the people who would actually consider your church their home. So all right, actually, Lee, I'll let you explain the tool.
I knew you were going to do that to me. So I really stepped into K World about 2 weeks ago, and so really stepped way out of my lane. So I knew he was going to throw this to me. But basically, we were having some conversations. Brian Becker, who's not on the call today, really kind of was pushing on using January and what Kay talked about as kind of a peak point. And so doing some calculations, using some AI, et cetera, we were able to put together, and Kay has scrubbed this out as well, and Nate, who's on the call, we put together a spreadsheet that we're going to share with you. I can't claim there might not be some bugs in it, but the spreadsheet itself, I think, could be helpful, even if you just want to verify. So I was meeting with New North yesterday in San Francisco, and we ran this with them. And at the end of the conversation around Easter, we actually eliminated a service. Not just based on this. So please don't get off this call, run this spreadsheet, and go make massive changes. This is just one factor. As we like to say, data deserves a seat at the table. So just for some of you, we wanted to give you an easy plug-in to at least have a conversation. So basically, the way that this spreadsheet is set up is you take your numbers in the dark blue. And again, you're going to be able to download this. I'll try to throw it in the chat when I get a breather here, so you can just download it straight from there. But make a copy of it, put your numbers in. Basically, what you're doing is you're filling in the top blue on the left there that you can see on the screen, which is calculating what is our average weekend adult attendance. So keep in mind, this is only adults. It's dealing with auditorium capacity. If you've got kids capacity issue, that's another thing. What is our January average weekend attendance this year? What is our adult seating capacity? What is our current plan for services for our Easter weekend? Do not include Good Friday. We would encourage you not to, because in most cases that is a separate service and will draw potentially duplicates for sure. And so this
We're
is
talking
based
about
on
identical services. So if you actually have an
Correct.
identical service, like
that.
we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all identical, then you would still count those.
Great clarifier. Yeah. So if you're running a separate Good Friday service that's not connected, that wouldn't be part of this, right? We're talking about your Easter service flow. And then on the second layer there, you're going to put in, do some quick tabulations on what your average weekend January has been versus your Easter over the last 3 years. And that's going to give you a multiplier, or what we're calling a lift factor, that will then apply to what you can project this year to be. As you see in the top right, the chart even will tell you, are you red, yellow, or green as far as where you currently are in what services you're planning to have. And so that's what this plays out. The bottom left is a little bit more deep diving into the weeds, but it's looking at the spread of services potentially and capacity as far as where the spread of how people will show up over a Saturday, Sunday experience. Those percentages on the left, we plugged in there. Those are not like known data. Those were our best guess set. If you do a Saturday service at 4 o'clock, you're probably going to run about 60% of your capacity in the seats, versus between 10 and 11 on a Sunday, Easter Sunday, you're most likely using overflow. And so because that's a prime time. And so that just gives you a look at the spread there. Kay, I'm going to let you clean up everything I just said. Okay.
You did great, and yeah, fantastic job, Lee.
There you go.
Yeah, really, there's the top part that Lee has put together on the top to be able to come up with a number, and the bottom part really is the capacity for room and space, and so it's really looking at what are you struggling with, like the three things that you guys have always heard as far as where you tap out. Are you tapping out in parking? Are you tapping out in kids? Or are you tapping out in the auditorium? Right. So look at that, stress test that, look at how much you can, what's your maximum capacity on that, and then reverse engineering behind that. There was a couple of different questions as far as how do I determine service times and what the best service times are for Easter. I commented on that, but I think one of the things that you're just going to find, context is obviously going to dictate some of this stuff, but really more than anything different than Christmas is everybody wants to come on Easter Sunday. And usually that prime time between 10 to 11 is probably the biggest, and so it'll balloon and peak, and you're going to try to do everything in your leadership power to be able to convince your volunteers and your core to not come to those services, right? So, and you will have diminishing returns the further away it is from that hour. So everything's a pressure valve to be able to really create that opportunity for new people to be able to come to those services. So, but yeah, looking at historical data, seeing where your high points are for the services, slide your services. I would not be afraid to change your service times. So if you normally have 3 services and you want to add a 4th on a Sunday, that you're moving all of them, or you're adding another one, whatever it might be, don't be afraid to change your service times on Easter because of that. And then, Steve, I think you asked about our services. You don't want to know what our 8 services. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think 6:30, 6:30, 5:30, 5 and 6:30, and then 4 on Sunday. I think.
And Joe mentioned sunrise services in the chat. I don't know your context is there, but typically a sunrise service in a lot of contexts, again, I could be wrong, is not an alternative for people. It tends to function as, I know a lot of people will do sunrise and then come to your Easter service. So again, to Kay's point earlier, unless you're running sunrise as an identical experience, I would treat it more like your outlier Good Friday and not include that as far as how we're going to fend off capacity issues. Having a 6 a.m. is probably not going to help you with your 10 a.m. It's really not. Those sunrise services are awesome. It's not going to help you probably solve your capacity issue there. Other questions? You can unmute now. I know the chat's hot, but feel free. We'll take a minute or two here and answer any questions on here. By the way, that sheet that I just put, somebody click and make sure it's good. But the other thing we would suggest is that even if you've already decided where you are, which is totally awesome, it might be fun just to run it through and just to see if it confirms what you're already doing. It may give you just another factor to go, okay, we're right on or we're right off or whatever. Like I said, at New North, we ran it yesterday and kind of looked at the spread of our volunteers, et cetera, and thought we actually can afford with some overflow usage to back down from a service, which will help with our volunteers, et cetera. Again, everybody likes to do lots of services. We actually, would encourage you, like, don't do too many services just for the sake of doing them and have very small capacity and burn your volunteers out. You want to hone that in as best as possible to maximize efficiency and effectiveness and your volunteer teams.
Yeah, the difference I think I mentioned in tier two, the difference between Christmas and Easter as far as your attendance and your service times is Christmas, you want to span it across multiple days, as many days as possible, because it's all about options in Christmas. On Easter, it's about connecting it as close as you can to the Easter prime time. And so, literally, if you're doing a Thursday, Friday, it's because you have to, and you got to get people, to be able to facilitate that out number that we were talking about for projections of what you're imagining and getting. But it's not about you don't want to do it across multiple days if you don't have to,
Correct.
like you want to concentrate on that day. Christmas is a completely different piece, so we can talk about that later.
Before we move
Okay.
on, and yeah, you can unmute, but Evan had asked about incentive. I think a lot of you probably have leaned into that. So if you have ideas, you might have missed it in the chat. But if you're on the call, he's looking at how do you actually incentivize people to move from Sunday to Saturday. The most effective means is if you're an Easter bunny, Easter egg hunt kind of a church format. A lot of churches now are offering that, but they will push it to Saturday exclusively. And so what that does is it moves, it is incentive big time for your families to be there on Saturday. And so a lot of churches are doing that, offering their Easter egg like a family service only on Saturday kind of a deal, to try to create more incentive. There's probably some other ideas around pancake breakfasts and stuff to get people there at 8 a.m.
Yeah, but it is truly challenging your core to be
It
able
is.
to do it. And they will literally do what you tell them to do. I mean, you just are surprised every single time. You cast the vision and do it, and even remind them that you will probably want to do this for your sake, because you don't want to face those crowds on Easter. All right.
We good,
Next.
guys? We next? Okay. We got just a few minutes left. We wanted to revisit something, and here's the motivation behind it is just over the last few months, as our team has kind of experienced some different settings and what we've watched and seen, is we thought it would be helpful as we kick off 2026 to revisit a resource and a book that most of you probably have already interacted with or read. It's the Heath Brothers books, The Power of Moments. You probably heard us mention it on this call a number of times. We highly recommend it as a non-faith book alongside Unreasonable Hospitality when it comes to how you operate towards people that are not here yet. So number one, if you have not read Power Moments, it should probably get downloaded like right now. One of our guys will throw it in the chat. The audiobook is actually freaking awesome for Power Moments because some of the stories they tell, et cetera, just come across really awesome on audio. And it's probably a book that your entire team should probably read, but at a minimum, anybody who is front facing towards guests, etc., or is involved in producing experiences, should read it. It's amazing. And here's the basic premise behind the book, and we just have a few minutes, so we're not going to be able to cover it as well as we should. But uh, basically, the idea is, how do you design moments that matter? How do you create moments that matter, whether that be in your worship services or in other environments? And again, they have these principles that they talk about, but over the last bit, it's been really interesting to watch as many of us have tried to design things. And sometimes, frankly, I think we need to challenge our teams a little more, if you'll allow me, that we have people on our teams that are responsible for designing moments, and they are not designing moments, they are designing worship services, or they are designing guest pathways, or they are designing, kids next gen environments, but they're not really leaning into moments. And so here's how they basically, not rocket science, but defining moments, as the Heath brothers really talk about it, is really this idea of meaningful experiences that stand out in our memory. That's it. Okay. You're like, wow, what is that? Well, the example they use, that's really the classic example, is from this one rule. And if you get nothing else from the call today, take this and take it to your teams. It's what they call the peak end rule. Basically, the peak end rule says, when anybody goes to anything or they have an experience, they will typically remember the peak moment. What was the high moment, right? Sometimes the pit moment, but the peak moment, and they will typically remember the end moment. And so they use Disneyland or Walt Disney World as an example. We've all done it, right? You spend way too much money. You go to Disneyland, you buy the tickets, you make the reservation, you take your two kids, and you get in there, and it's hot, the lines are long, kids are cranky. You're basically needing to get a third job because you've spent so much on churros and feeding them, right? And so you go through the whole day and you're just like, wow, why did we do this? Blah, 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 blah. But what they've learned is, when they ask people about it, that typically when they go back to the hotel and they get a night's rest and they wake up the next day, they will say things like, that was an amazing experience. And they'll talk about two things. They'll talk about the peak moment. We got a picture taken with Mickey Mouse, remember? And there's that picture we took with Mickey Mouse. And then they will also talk about the end moment. It's why Disney does the fireworks at 9:30 every night, because you go back and you forget all the sweaty lines that you stood in all day. And you go, man, we stood there on Main Street in front of the castle and the fireworks went off. And that end moment was just great. And so that's why every year you pay the money again and you go back, if you're a Disney fool, because you're not thinking about the hot lines that you're standing in Central Florida. You're thinking about those peak moments that you can't wait to. I mean, I have some in my memory banks of peak moments of taking my kids, at Christmas at Disney when the snow's falling on Main Street, right? That sort of a thing, or standing there watching the fireworks. So you're like, that's really cool, guys, but what does that really mean for us? Well, I think it means we as leaders need to lean back into our teams and lean back into the organizations we're leading, and start getting a better handle on, are we creating or allowing moments to happen? And before you blow up the chat, we're not talking about manufacturing spiritual moments. That's not what we're talking about here. We understand that there is a spiritual aspect to what we do, where we're creating space for God to move that is not our responsibility. At the same time, we do have a responsibility to set those moments up, to make it possible for those moments to happen by how we actually use the things that we have at our disposal to make that happen. So that's where we want to push in for the last few moments. Kay, do you want to walk through these four real quick? If you got them in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see
Or I
here.
skipped a slide.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about the focus and time intention?
Yeah, just real quick, guys. So here's what it means, okay? And here's where we're going to spend the last 15 minutes of our time together. We want to literally talk about practical ideas, and maybe you have some and you can add them, of how you are creating moments across your organization. Okay. But here's the spiritual idea behind it. And it comes from the book, but it also comes from that guy Jesus. Is basically there is a lot of attention that we can pay to fixing things, right? Eliminating the negatives. That is important. But in the Power of Moments book, what they really advocate is sometimes we're spending 80% of our energy trying to move people who are a one to a three versus looking at the people. And maybe if you think about the spiritual spectrum, who are engaging with our church, who are ready to step over the line of faith, who are taking ownership, and they would advocate that you create more moments that would actually move somebody from a four to a seven. When I read that, I thought about how uh, Jesus talks about let's not put new wine into old wineskins and keep trying to do that. Don't put a new patch on an old garment. It's kind of that same thing that we have to analyze: is how much time are we spending trying to satisfy or trying to coddle the people who are really a one as far as how engaged they are, how on board they are, versus can we create some amazing moments for people, again, not just on weekends, but in their experience with our church, that will move them not just from a four, but to a seven on the scale. And is that even possible? So that's kind of that idea. And there's four
Yeah.
frames I'll give to Kay.
Yeah, and that the 4 to 7 really is creating those raving fans. It's really creating
Right.
that, element of people that's like, okay, I love my church. And so I can't wait for you guys to read this and come up with
Yes.
the different ideas, because it really rocked my world years ago when I read this. Basically, what we're talking about is taking any boring everyday decision and then using surprise and delight to be able to create the power
Mm.
of moments. And so anything and everything that you do, it's like, where is a surprise element, or where is there a delight element where you've broken the script? They're like, okay, this is what I think it is. And then, whoop, and then now I remember that. And it is so powerful. The book talks about so many great examples about the popsicle hotline. There is this like motel in LA that they have completely revamped. And they were trying to solve an ordinary problem where basically kids wanted popsicles. And so what they did was in the poolside, they actually put I think it was a red phone or yellow phone or something like that, and put it next to the poolside. And literally what you do is you pick up that phone and says popsicle hotline, and they'll deliver whatever flavor or color that you choose or want. And that has become such a sticky factor in a power of moments thing that literally people and families will book the hotel because of that. Or Doubletree, obviously we
It's not
know
even
that
a
you're going to
great
get that.
hotel, by the way, that hotel, right?
Yeah.
It's like a
It
motel.
was a motel. It was a motel that they revamped, right? Obviously we know the Doubletrees are, you're going to get that warm chocolate. I mean, they've installed ovens or warmers in the check-in, at Doubletrees, right? So it gives you example after example to be able to say, inspire us to be able to say, okay, what we're doing on an ordinary way, like what could we do? We've got some examples
Yep.
too that Lee and I were riffing around, and we'd love to hear your examples about this. But anyway, that's kind of the power of what this could do and be.
Yep.
So really, the book kind of talks about it in this way. It talks about the elevation of moments that lift people out of the ordinary and rise above the everyday. That's what I was just talking about breaking the strip of the ordinary, and what makes something memorable from nothing that was necessary to just something that now it's like, I can't believe the excellence or the extra effort or the above and beyond. Insight, the moments of revelation or ahas, often achieved through action and self discovery. These moments shift identity of purpose. Great story about a NICU. I remember that one, but basically, it's like this the baby and everything was there. And the people who actually called that baby and said, this baby is a fighter. And that one word changed the identity. And it was an insight. And that became actually something that was forever actually part of that journey of that child's identity.
By the way,
And
Kay,
so, Mhm.
By the way, Kay, one of the examples in the book I just remembered that makes us look like we're looping back to the beginning of the call is they talk about the doctor who created MRI experiences for children,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And so they
yeah.
created these MRIs that look like submarines, and they decorate the room so it looks like they're going into an experience. They go into a canoe. And so this doctor watched these kids go into an MRI terrified, and the parents are terrified. And so they literally created MRIs that kids, they still have to do the thing, but it's like an experience for them. That would be an example of an insight that then elevated the moment for the kid to get through something they needed to do. Sorry to
It's so
interrupt you there.
good. Yeah, and but I mean that's exactly what we're saying is that do we have to just do church the way that everybody does church, or can we use this as an opportunity to be able to elevate that and create that elevation and insight, but pride, moments that make us feel capable and proud, often by recognizing milestones. These moments mark progress or belonging. So this is the celebrating the firsts, right? Like, so when somebody does something for the first time, or somebody, or we've heard of actually people who celebrate volunteers on their anniversary day that they started. That's amazing, right? Like,
Right.
that's memorable. That's pride. That's like, thank you. It marks progress and belonging and success. And so, those are ways that we can say, how can because what gets celebrated gets repeated, right? So that's a pride. And then the connection, moments that deepen relationships, including shared struggle and shared meetings. So, whenever we create, some kind of experience, or, the foxhole experience that we even talk about, it requires participation. It's not observation. Now we're in it, but there is something that remember from that.
Mm.
Whether it be like a rooted celebration, people go through something together and then they actually graduate together and they celebrate together. There is a connection that happen in that. There's moments that actually capture that too. Moments of vulnerability where people share, from a depth of place. And because of that, there's the power of moment that actually unlocks people into a different sphere that they were never even part of. So that's kind of the power of moments. And he breaks that down. Great examples, great stories, and it will get your mind going, especially if you're an invention and the working genius. Oh man, it's gonna be like crack, just it's just so good. So
So
that's
good.
the power of moments.
So in the 4 minutes okay, great. Seriously, dude, great. It's a lot. And he's really hitting something that you guys have to dive into. So he's just giving you the scope of it. So here's what we're going to do. Just kind of flood with like one-offs really quick. In the chat, there's a few people that are doing it. We may unmute here. Let me give you some that we kind of wrote down that are just, and we kind of built it a little bit around church on mission, here and there, gather purposely, connect deep to service. But where are some moments you create? Let me just start with the gathering, and we're actually not going to spend a lot of time there because then we start getting into service elements. But I will challenge you guys, and I've done this before. But guys, if you are someone who is alongside your worship creative person, challenge them in moments that they are creating. What is the last 10% in that planning center order of flow that hasn't been done? What is the background on that big LED wall that they had to do that you could do to make a song go, right? You guys have got way too many people who are karaoke singers that are pretending to be creatives on your team, and you need to challenge them to be creative, right? To create that 15 or 20 minutes that you have on your worship gatherings. That's what we need from them, is to lean in and to make that happen, and you give them permission within your thing. So different sensory moments, silence are powerful. Anything that Kay mentioned earlier that kind of breaks the script. If you're running the same Sunday morning for the last 3 years, I would challenge you to go back and to go, what is it that we can do with our host moment, with different things that can actually make it powerful, that's there. And it takes some brain power, takes some getting maybe some ideators in the room, but there's some simple things. Kay, talk about the pre-order thing, Starbucks.
Mm. What we've done before is for next steps. If you have a discover or next step or those type of things, is that some churches, what they'll do is they'll say as part of the registration form, say, "What's your favorite Starbucks drink?" And then when they actually show up, we actually have that favorite Starbucks drink for them. And they're blown away, right? Because it's like,
Here's
not
your
only,
drink.
did you ask and you cared and I thought it was just an icebreaker question, but we actually have it for you. The reason, Andrew, you actually ratted us out. So the reason why we sometimes do the Starbucks gift cards is because it's a power of moment thing that actually
Mhm.
people remember. And really, here's one of the real reasons why we do it. We're actually, telling you how the sausage is made, because when you actually, receive something of value, like, okay, that helped me, or I got something of worth or value, you actually want to participate because of it. And that's
Yeah.
something to remember even in the next step. So I remember, Lee, tell them what you guys did during COVID, when you guys did Next
Yeah.
Step online.
Yeah. And
That was a brilliant move.
yeah, during COVID, and it continued even a little bit beyond. It was our guest follow up that we were doing during that time as people were indicating that they were guests. We were literally just sending crumble cookies to their house unannounced, just getting them delivered through Uber Eats or through, DoorDash. And it would just be a Monday morning thing. Obviously, there's some resource involved there, but just doing that. And people would just get the little 4-pack of cookies, and it wouldn't even be it wouldn't be an ask, it would just be a thank you for coming, as part of our pathway principles. There are some churches now that are doing Domino's pizzas or Papa John's, and they're not asking, they're literally just anybody who checks in their kids area on Monday night, they just send a pizza at 6:30 to the house and say thank you so much, for coming. And that's an unexpected moment. No one's going to reject a pizza, and whether they eat the pizza or not, right? It's an ability to kind of connect with them. And these are all kind of pathway moments with guests, but there's service moments as well. There's baptism moments. A lot of churches are using something that creates a moment there around baptism, where sheep tags are being added to a wall, or some sort of a writing on the wall that's a memento of them actually having a moment there. I know photography is
Mhm.
overused now, but you can still use photography when there's it kind of, it meets with the moment of pride, where you can use that as a way of honoring in that moment. It's a huge deal. And so that's something
Yeah.
that, we would ask you to do. Again, we're just spitballing here. You guys have great people around you. You guys are either creatives or you know where they are. Our challenge would be, as you get off this call, for you would be, as you get off this call, let's break up the mundane. Let's break up the meaningless. Let's break up the stuff that's mechanical in nature. And let's try to find some real moments of meaning that can be there, and then get out of the way so that God can do his thing in the midst of those moments, would be our appeal to you.
Flip the script and surprise and delight. I mean, that's what I would say. What are moments where you can do that? A kid, a couple of weeks ago, bumped his head in one of the classrooms on the table, had this huge bruise or whatever. Well, that week, the kids team decided to just send them a care package with a whole bunch of stuff. And I
Right.
guarantee you that family will be back, right? So it's just those things. It's like, okay, yeah, we could have just said, oh, sorry, thank you, give a band-aid and see you next week.
Fill out a
But
report.
we but yeah, and then fill out a report on the back end. Make sure you do that, Staffers. But but what can you do to surprise and delight? And I think if you cast this out to your staff, there's going to be certain people that are gonna
Mm,
be like, man, we could do this, we could do that, and it all doesn't have to cost money. I think that's probably sometimes in our seat, it's like, okay, this is going to cost more money and more work,
no.
but I do think that it could be worth it. So I would say as an action point, and we can do this as a follow up email with all this, is if you guys have thoughts or ideas or things that you've done or ideas that you're planning to do, send that over. We'll curate some of those things and we'll start sharing some of those things even on an ongoing basis on some of our calls, because it just inspires. I don't know if it inspires you, but every time I hear one of those stories, I'm like, oh, yeah, we could do that. Or
Right.
it actually triggers something else that we could do.
Excelente. That was a lot in 60 minutes, but we got there. Brandon, also, I want to shout out to Brandon on the chat. He talked a little bit about in the giving lane.
Mhm.
Really,
Great.
it's like, how are some things that you can do, not just to mark first time givers or large givers, but actually set a process in place to actually, help mark moments for people when they hit certain milestones along their giving
Brandon,
stewardship
you
journey.
even said 50 and 100. Talk about that.
Yeah, 50. I loved sending a thank you for 50th and 100th gift, because you've got like I've got some sweet like single moms that give $25 a week for the past, number of years. And man, it's just cool. It's just not always about those big givers, top givers. It's a way to really honor people's faithfulness. So I think those 50th and 100th are big milestones, and people are blown away. We've done some like you said, surprise gifts to them, and actually shown up and just go, hey, thanks so much for your 100th gift. Here's some coffee, or here's a gift, things like that. But man, just a handwritten note makes a huge difference too on that. So something
Love
to
it.
celebrate. I think
All
recurring
right.
giving is big too. Goodness sakes,
When
if
they
someone
sign up
signs
for
up for
that.
recurring giving, we have
Yeah.
got to honor that and acknowledge that. I mean, when I sign up to give to Netflix every month, or all the different things, they don't thank me at all. They don't give me
They never
anything
do.
but raise my
You're
rates every month.
We're going to do this. We're going to jump off. We're going to pray out. But let me say this as a reminder as you take all of this in process. We believe as an organization at Grow Minimum that we are process. You guys are content and context. So I want you to we would love for you to take everything today and don't just go nuts, but lay it over the filter of your values, your unique DNA in your context, but do something that would start to elevate some moments, to challenge your team within your context to do that. And we believe that that would be a huge win for you. All right. Okay. Snod, pray us out, bro.
Absolutely. Jesus, thanks for the opportunity to have just some dialogue around some of these key conversations, whether it be Easter services. We pray for wisdom and discernment as we make decisions around that. Lord, we even pray for the power of moments, that as we try to flip the script and surprise and delight and just to reach people, we pray, God, that you would give us vision beyond our years and experiences to do so. As we help people find and follow you, may it be done through the different places that you've stewarded to us. And we pray, God, that it would just have deep, eternal impact, giving hope to just a hopeless generation. God, we love you and praise you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, everybody. We'll see you in February.
Thanks, guys.
Go make some moments.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.